Hello friends, welcome to another question and answer video. It's been a little while since I've done one of these. So if you're new to these videos, basically how it goes is that I show you guys real-time footage of me working on an illustration, and throughout the video I answer some questions that I got from my audience. It's basically like a visual podcast, so I definitely recommend you bust out your own art supplies or work on something while this video plays so that basically I can keep you company, whether it's also you painting or doing your laundry or whatever it is. So, like my previous Q&A videos, the footage that you see is in real time, but I do edit out bits here and there so that it's just a little bit more condensed and concise. Also, the first half of the questions will be more art related, and then the second half of the video I will be answering more fun questions related to movies, TV shows, and whatever silly things. Also, before we get into the questions, the piece that you see me working on here is the artwork that will be featured as the exclusive Patreon print for the month of November. So if you pledge anytime between now and November 30th in my physical rewards tiers, you'll receive this print and this cute glittery sticker as well in the mail. And if you're interested in seeing the sketching process of this piece, that is going to be the exclusive Patreon video for this month as well. So without any further ado, let's answer some questions. So the first question we've got here is, how do you decide on which supplies to invest in? So I think that the key thing to keep in mind when you decide to invest in any product is to do your own research. The benefit of our current age is that a quick search on the internet allows you to find tons of information and reviews from many different sources. Whether it is an article or video review, etc., it's good to seek out opinions from multiple different places on the product because everyone's experience with it is going to be different. Next question, how do you decide on which brand to use for each painting? Is it on impulse or is it planned? It really depends. I think that before I start any painting, the first thing I decide on is which medium I want to use, whether it's watercolor, gouache, markers, etc. And then from there, that kind of narrows down what brand I want to use. And then I also have to decide on the paper or the surface that I'm going to work on. And then if I know the painting is going to be for a YouTube video, I'm usually more conscious of the brands. So when it comes to paints or markers, I try to stick to one brand or the fewest amount of brands, purely because it just makes it easier for me when I list out the supplies I used in the video's description, and it's just more straightforward for you guys when I inevitably get asked what I'm using in the video. If the illustration is not going to be in a video, however, if I'm not filming it, I'm just doing my own thing, then I definitely have much more freedom and I can just follow whatever direction my intuition takes me, and I can mix up the brands and do whatever I want with it. Has watercolors always been your go-to? No, it actually has not been. Like many people, I initially started out with just regular pencils and paper that was lying around the house. And then when I really kind of got more and more interested in drawing in high school, I eventually upgraded and invested in really nice colored pencils, and that was my go-to for a very long time. I remembered, I bought a 48 set, I think, of Premiere Prismacolor pencils, and that really changed the game for me. I still love them to this day. They are really, really nice, buttery, great color payoff colored pencils. What is your favorite color combo to work with in your art? Definitely, I think my most commonly used kind of color palette is some kind of variation of pink, blue, and purple. I generally find myself gravitating towards cool color palettes by default, I guess because one, pink and magenta is my favorite, and I find that blue and purple just really feel very harmonious with it. What was your first digital art program? Honestly, I think it was a really old bootleg version of Photoshop, if I remember correctly. I'm a millennial, so back in my day, we had this thing called LimeWire, which was like a very sketchy torrenting, downloading source. And I remembered my friend had found a bootleg download on it for Photoshop, and I'm pretty sure that's what I had used, which Obviously, I do not recommend doing that, but you know, I was young and that's what I think I used. But yeah, don't be like me. Don't get bootleg stuff. There's tons of free digital art programs now, like Krita and Metabang, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. I think those are free. Any case, there's way more options now, so don't download sketchy bootleg stuff onto your computer. Do you consider digital artwork as real art? Absolutely. I admire tons of digital artists, and I think that it's absurd that anyone would think that digital illustration is not as valid as traditional illustration. Just like pencils, watercolors, oils, sculpture, etc. are all different mediums from one another that each require a particular set of skills, the absolute same can be said for digital. It's just another medium for an artist to execute their creative vision and requires, practice in a certain skill in order to master that medium. Would you ever do a full digital illustration? That being said, I personally don't favor doing digital illustrations myself, so no, I don't have any plans to do fully rendered digital illustrations anytime soon. The exception would be more merchandise type things like stickers and pins and those kinds of items, but for the most part, my heart is really in traditional painting. Which is your favorite brush to use on Procreate? So like I mentioned earlier, I don't work digitally very often for fully finished illustrations. I mainly use it for sketching and planning out my traditional illustrations. But that being said, I often use the 6B pencil for sketching and the nickel roll painting brush and the Bonobo chalk for just blocking in colors and textures. And since Procreate has updated a few times, there has been many more new brushes added, but I haven't really spent any time to try them out because I just don't really need to. Why do you prefer doing traditional art? For me, there is something so satisfying about the experience and process of traditional media. The tactile feel of your tool against the paper, sharpening your pencils, mixing your own colors, watching the colors interact with each other, problem solving when the medium doesn't, work the way that you expected it to. I just find it so much more engaging. And for me, I find that when I work digitally, it just feels so much more monotonous. And so I lose, my attention span for it is so much shorter. And I also feel like having a physical piece of artwork at the end of the process as well, it just feels so rewarding. And yeah, I don't know, it's just so much more interesting for me. But again, like I had mentioned earlier, not trying to invalidate digital artists whatsoever, but this is just my own personal preference. Least favorite medium. When I was in high school, I had my first and only experience with oil paints, and because I'm kind of impatient, I really did not like how long oil paints took to dry. So that being said, I haven't used them since, and that was a very, very long time ago. So it's hard to say if I would feel differently if I were to try them now, but that is definitely a medium I felt like I was very frustrated with when I tried it. What is the thing that you enjoy most about your art? This is actually a really hard question. I feel like there just are so many things that I want to work on and improve on, but I guess if I had to pick something, I think that I generally do enjoy how I draw faces. Favorite piece you've made this year? I think it would have to be this Japanese girl gang boss that I did at the beginning of the year with acrylic gouache. I just really enjoy how the colors turned out, and I was really happy with how the pose and movement, kind of the dynamic of the piece, turned out as well. It was one of those things where I had a, fairly clear vision for it, and it actually came to life, which is a really satisfying feeling, because I'm sure many of you can relate to the feeling of the piece that you made in real life doesn't kind of match the thing that you envisioned in your head. So this was one of those instances where it actually worked out. What's your favorite part of the process? This might seem weird since most of my work has a lot of shading and rendering in it, but my favorite part is actually that first layer of blocking in solid color. I think maybe because it's pretty mindless and it's really satisfying and pretty low pressure, and it's just watching like the white of the paper or surface become, covered in paint and color. It's just very exciting. How often do you buy new art supplies? Do you buy things as you see them or budget it out? So up until very recently, I had been working at an art supply store for many years. So as you can imagine, being surrounded by art supplies all the time, I would buy new materials pretty often. But now that I don't have that sweet employee discount and I just have accumulated a ton of art supplies now, I don't purchase new stuff very often anymore. And I probably have enough materials to last me a lifetime. What were your struggles that you've had when you were trying out new mediums? Trying out a new medium will always come with its learning curves and challenges. I think it can be difficult switching your brain to adapt to a new medium if it's vastly different from the process that you're normally accustomed to. So for example, with watercolors, it's a very translucent medium, and so it requires you to work from light to dark. Whereas an opaque medium like gouache or acrylic, you don't necessarily need to follow that same principle. And even if you want to use the gouache or acrylic similar to watercolors by diluting it with lots of water, it will still behave much differently. So you just really got to be on your toes and adapt when you approach something new. But I think that's what makes trying out new mediums so exciting. And I think just keeping in mind that it's not always going to be really easy right off the bat. And so I think that kind of helps potentially deter any kind of discouragement you might feel by not, producing something amazing right off, like immediately. What mediums or materials would you like to experiment with in the future? So the past little while, I have been accumulating supplies to make clay pins and earrings. I think that there's just something so charming about these handmade trinkets, and I just really wanted in on the fun. I've been seeing so many different artists make polymer clay kind of items, and so I really want to try it out myself, but due to limited time and trying to prioritize all the different things I need to do, I haven't gone around to actually trying them out, but that's definitely on my list of things I want to do when I get the chance. Do you follow any tutorials or YouTube channels to quote unquote fill in the gaps in your knowledge? I don't necessarily seek out art tutorials specifically, but I definitely watch tons of different artists on YouTube because I think it is very interesting and valuable to see how other artists approach their work and their process. I think that it is so important to constantly be learning and acquiring new knowledge from multiple sources so that you can continue to grow as an artist. And even if it's not the same medium or subject, I think that seeing another artist's process can still be very insightful and be applied to your own work. And I guess one of the things that I do look at for like tutorials specifically is anything related to like video editing, because I'm still kind of a noob at it. I only know how to do like very basic things with video editing. So that's something that I think I do often have to look up. How do you cope with artist block? So I'd say that there's two main types of art block. First being the type where you're uninspired and unmotivated and don't know what to draw. And then the second being that no matter what you draw or what you paint, everything just turns out like hot garbage. And I find myself in both of those situations from time to time. And the first plan of action is I just force myself through it by doing studies from reference photos. And in doing this, it's much more straightforward since you don't have to stress over thinking of unique concepts, but rather just focus on the drawing that is in front of you and trying to replicate what you see. Another thing that helps me is to switch to a different medium. If it's, if I'm not feeling painting, then I'll switch to markers, colored pencils, etc. And if I really can't bring myself to create anything in any capacity, then I'll spend my time working on the other elements of my, career workload, such as answering emails, fulfilling shop orders, editing a video, etc. That way I'm still being productive and not just like wallowing in self-pity, because I feel like if I just like shut down, then I will feel really guilty later for not using that time productively. What advice do you have for someone who's feeling inadequate with their art? I know it's easier said than done, but try not to compare yourself to other artists. If you're having a hard time avoiding comparison, then maybe take a little break from social media / looking at other artists' work so that you can focus on your own work. And I think that something that can be very motivating is comparing your current artwork to your past artwork. The older, the better. I think that it can be really reassuring when you can see the progress between the two pieces, and I think that it'll also help you understand what you can improve on and allow you to set some goals that you can work towards. Do you still experience bad art days? Absolutely, 100%. The thing about social media is that generally people are presenting the highlights and the best that they have to offer. This, of course, can be deceiving because it can sometimes make it seem like it's really effortless or all the artwork comes very easily. This is the reason why I try to express my struggles in my process videos when I find something particularly challenging. Like my recent Kiki's Delivery Service gouache painting, I had such a difficult time with that piece, but when you're scrolling through Instagram and you see the finished product, most people would just think that it was really easy. And if I create something that in the end I'm still very unhappy with, then I won't post it online. And so I think that when people are viewing artists, they just think, wow, look at all this amazing stuff that they've made. But in reality, you're not seeing all of the ugly stuff that's also being produced in between. Have you ever wanted to quit art / take a break from art? Never in a long-term sense. I don't really have any other hobbies, so if I stopped drawing and painting, I wouldn't really be left with much else. But I will say that I have been really wanting to take a break from social media / the business side of my art. I have definitely been feeling the burnout of juggling all of these different projects and deadlines and platforms, but that is just the reality of the art career that I've chosen for myself. And of course, I am incredibly thankful to be in this position, but naturally, I'm just very tired. However, no one's going to pay for my vacation days or sick days, and so here we are. How often do you start over on a project because you made a mistake in coloring / shading? Not very often, actually. If you've seen my process video of my illustration Soul or the Kiki's Delivery Service video I just mentioned, when something goes wrong in my painting process, I usually try to fix it rather than start over. I really hate doing the exact same thing more than once, so I'll just push through the frustration and try to figure out a way to improve the piece. And then if that doesn't work, then if I'm still really attached to the original idea, then I might restart, or I'll just abandon it and start something new. If you had to give a tip on making a YouTube channel, what would it be? Make the videos that you want to make. The thing about YouTube and social media in general is that people are always going to request and demand specific content from you. There's nothing wrong with seeing what your audience likes and taking suggestions, but ultimately be sure whatever you do, it is still something that you are personally interested in, because making videos is a lot of work. So if you are forcing yourself to create content that you are not invested in just for the sake of pleasing the audience, it'll be a very, very miserable time. Plus, I think that when you're enthusiastic about something, your audience will appreciate it that much more. How do you decide on which pieces make it to your YouTube videos? Generally, when I plan to make a YouTube video, I think about what the focus is going to be. So normally that either means I'm going to be reviewing a particular brand or product, or I intend to talk about my process of how I use a particular medium. And then when I've settled on that, then I decide on the artwork depending on what strikes my inspiration. This is not always how the planning of it goes, but that is, I think, how it goes most of the time. If I have a more complicated illustration in mind, I won't film it. The reason for that is because filming my drawing / painting process really constrains and limits the way I usually like to work. When I'm filming, I have to be sure that I'm not turning the page around, not leaning in too close, because then my head will block the shot. I have to keep an eye on the battery life on my camera and other things like that. And so this is why most of the time you see on my channel, it's just like portraits, because they're just so much more straightforward for me to do while filming. Advice on how to connect with community. I would say that to start would be to think about the types of things that interest you, such as, talking about art supplies or books, fitness, food, TV shows, your pets, like anything. Then from there, evaluate which of those interests you can incorporate into your social media, whether it be sharing your book recommendations or making fan art of your favorite characters, reviewing new art supplies you received, taking cute photos of your pets. Sharing these different elements of yourself allows your audience to get a sense of who you are, and those shared interests in turn may lead them to relate to you in some way. So to use myself as an example, one of the ways I like to connect with you guys on Instagram is, of course, through my art, with drawing fan art that shows my followers what types of media and characters I enjoy. And then when it comes to the artwork that isn't fan art, you can still see my interest coming through the aesthetics and themes I choose, such as drawing witches or fantasy-inspired characters. And then to connect on another level, I also like to show, little snippets of my life in my stories and share funny memes and comics and, things like that, which allow my personality to come through. And I think that connecting with your audience through YouTube is bringing it to a whole other level, because you're creating long form content, and so essentially people are spending more time with you. And this is why I'm so adamant on doing voiceovers for my videos, because one of the things that I believe is that not only does it provide more value to the content being shown in the video, but it is also another way of just sharing who I am to the audience. And I think this is the reason why a lot of people who do studio vlogs have such a dedicated following, because they're allowing people into their lives in a way that really makes you connect with them, and it almost makes you feel like they're your friend. So, of course, not everyone is prepared to share every element of their life on the internet. And so while it's important to be genuine to who you are also absolutely entitled to your own privacy. And so at the end of the day, share the parts of you that you are comfortable with, and, allow your personality to shine through your content at whatever capacity makes sense for you. Would you consider being an illustrator for a children's book? There was definitely a time when I thought I wanted to illustrate children's books, but now that I've gotten a better understanding of what kind of artwork and workflow I enjoy, I don't think I would actually be suited for it. And the reason I say that is because I have a short attention span for projects. I prefer to create a singular piece of artwork, or maybe like a very small series of illustrations, and then move on to the next. I think that if I were to work on a storybook, I would get bored of drawing the same characters over and over back to back. And this is the same reason why I know I would never be able to be like an animator or comic book artist either. And yeah, I think those kinds of projects are very, very long term. And so I know I would lose my passion for it pretty quickly. I think that the extent or the most I'm willing to do is like, the monthly art challenge that happens in October is kind of like the extent of how I'm willing to do it. And even then I'm like struggling with it. Any other drawing series that you're excited for after October? Well, I unfortunately bit off a little more than I could chew during October, and so I'm still going to be working on completing my Zodiac illustration series in November. But after I finish those, I think I actually just want to spend more time experimenting in my sketchbooks, and probably won't be doing any more kind of major art series until next year. Talk about your 5-year plan, future ambitions, and how do you think you'd succeed? This is actually a really good question that really made me think, because the funny thing is, I feel like I'm the type of person who doesn't often think that far ahead into the future. I tend to be more of a short-term goal type of person. But that being said, the general goal that I have for myself is that, of course, I hope that I can continue to support myself through my art that is still fulfilling. And the reason why I say fulfilling specifically is because I've come to realize that even if I'm technically doing something creative, but I'm not personally invested in it, I have a really hard time pushing myself through it. And this is the reason why I chose to pursue illustration instead of graphic design after I finished college, because I realized that graphic design wasn't really what I was passionate about. Another goal of mine would be to have a dedicated studio space, because right now my bedroom operates as my studio space as well, and it's really not ideal. I don't think I would even really want to rent out like a studio space necessarily. I think the perfect situation for me would just to have a separate room in my home that functions as my studio space. It would be really nice to have that separation without actually having to commute somewhere. And then I could, hopefully have everything in one place. Because currently, a lot of my packing supplies, merchandise, some of my art supplies, they're like all scattered around my living room because I just don't have enough space for them in my bedroom. So whenever I'm packing my shop orders, I have to like run around my apartment gathering everything. It's really inefficient. And to address the last part of the question, I think that in order to achieve these goals, I just have to keep building upon what I currently have. I really need to work on my time management so that I'm able to maintain the content that I currently put out, but also I would like to do more as well. At the beginning of this year, I was hoping to make more types of merchandise, but I just couldn't find the time to do so. And I would also like to do more live streaming again, but I feel like I'm just always out of energy. So anyways, fingers crossed I can sort this whole situation out. This next question is maybe a little bit of a hot topic, but the next one is same face syndrome or style. So of course you are free to disagree with me, and this is just my personal 2 cents on it. I really dislike the term same face syndrome because I think that when people use it against an artist, it is implying that because said artist draws similar faces, that they are lesser than or not as skilled. Secondly, when someone comments, something along the lines of, you have same face syndrome, it is typically in a very accusatory tone, and to me reads as coming from a place of entitlement because this commenter feels the need to tell the artist how they should draw. There are many successful artists out there who draw similar faces in their work, and do you think that makes them less skilled? I don't think so. Do we, as the audience who are consuming this content for free, have the right to tell them what they should or shouldn't draw? I don't think so either. So on the flip side though, when it comes to character design, that can be a different story. For example, if you are an aspiring character designer or animator who wants to work for a studio like Pixar, where the desired style is that the characters have very exaggerated, almost caricature-like features, then yes, you would likely be required to produce a wider array of faces. But what about a different animation style like Studio Ghibli, where yes, there are variations when it comes to more extreme characters, but generally there are a lot of faces that look quite similar. That being said, both Pixar and Ghibli have produced fantastic films that are just stylistically different from one another, and I don't think that, one studio having caricature-esque faces versus one that has similar looking faces doesn't make one less or better than the other. So, the bottom line is, draw the way that you want and what makes sense for you, because at the end of the day, you are the one who's putting the time and energy into creating the artwork, so you might as well do it in a style that makes you happy and not to appease others. All right, and next question. What advice would you give to a POC artist when the art world is dominated by white people? So, as a minority, I definitely understand that feeling like you don't belong can be very intimidating. But I think that no matter what your background is or where you're coming from, it's so important to put your unique voice out there. Celebrate who you are through your work so that other people can also feel represented and heard. Connect with other POC artists and celebrate their work too. That is what is so amazing about the internet and all these different platforms, is that it allows us to build our own communities with people all over the globe. And a piece of advice that I think applies to many different creative fields is that I think what makes you unique and what is important about your voice and making it heard is to create the work that you want to see. And especially if you feel like it's not being showcased enough or that there needs to be more of it, then that is your opportunity to fill in that void or to contribute to a particular subject matter or theme that is really important to you. All right, and now moving on to non-art related questions. The first one I've got here is, how are you? I'm doing okay. I've been feeling like I'm on low battery for the past few weeks in that I'm always chasing some kind of deadline. I think I just really need to buckle down and be more organized and manage my time better so that I can stay on top of all the things that I need to do and so I'm not constantly feeling overwhelmed. What are your daily habits? Every morning I shower and then I have breakfast with a coffee while watching a TV show. Anytime I have to rush in the morning and I don't get to do all of these things in this order, it puts me in a really bad mood. Do you have a self-care routine? I don't think I have a routine per se, but some of the things that I like to do to treat myself or ways to unwind are painting my nails with a feel-good movie or TV show playing. I also really love doing those like fun face masks, and lately I have been reading in bed for about an hour before I go to sleep so that it can help me sort of calm down my brain before trying to go to bed. Do you consider living in Canada forever, or are there any future moving plans? I definitely think I want to live in Canada forever. It's not perfect here, obviously, but there are a lot of privileges that I have here that sometimes I think I take for granted. And of course, I absolutely would love to travel to other countries and places, but of course, when we can. And yeah, in terms of a permanent resident though, Canada is definitely home for me. If you could play an instrument, which one would you choose? I think it would have to be the piano. I just think it's a really beautiful sounding instrument and it's something that I really love listening to. And by the way, I have no musical talents whatsoever, so being able to play any instrument at all would be amazing. Coffee or tea? I really enjoy both, but I do definitely start every morning with a coffee, which is kind of wild because this has been a routine that I've gone into only in the past few years. Previously, I was strictly a tea drinker, and back then I remembered I used to be so sensitive to caffeine that whenever I would have a coffee, I felt like my spidey senses were tingling. And but if I do drink a tea, my favorite is definitely a matcha latte, or I also really love London fogs as well. Are you a boba person? If yes, which one? Yes, I really enjoy bubble tea. I think my favorite is this one place in Toronto called Onezo, and they do flavored tapioca pearls, and they have one that's a brown sugar flavored one, and I think it just comes in with a milk tea, and it is so yummy. But if I am at a bubble tea place that doesn't have flavored tapioca, I usually go for something that will complement some kind of like lychee jelly or grass jelly or something like that. Favorite cookie? This is kind of specific, but there's this local gourmet ice cream shop here in Toronto called Bang Bang Ice Cream, and they make what is called the everything cookie, and it is so good. The name suggests that it pretty much has a little bit of everything in it. What is your favorite Halloween snack? So I asked these questions in October on my Instagram, so that's why I got this question. But yeah, I would say Reese's Pieces is definitely my favorite. Favorite savory snacks? I mean, it's definitely got to be chips, right? They are so satisfying when you're craving something salty. If you were a fruit, what fruit would you be? I would want to be a dragon fruit because they look cool as heck. They don't really taste like anything, but they look cool. Do you have any siblings? And if you do they drive you nuts? I do have an older sister, but No, I don't think I have the same kind of sibling rivalry dynamic that a lot of people do with their siblings. Do you have any stuffed toys? If so, got any favorites? Okay, guys, I used to have so many stuffed animals as a kid, particularly TY Beanie Babies, because obviously 90s baby over here. But I, of course, didn't hang on to all of them as an adult, but I did keep one who was my favorite, and that is Patty the Platypus. I also have a kind of medium-sized Mickey Tsum Tsum that I got when I was in Disney World a number of years ago. Your favorite childhood memory? I have tons of very fond childhood memories, but the one that comes to me right now is when myself and my other friends in the neighborhood, we made the longest hopscotch game. I grew up in the suburbs, and so everyone's house had like a big driveway, and basically all the kids on that block were my friends. And you know, in the back in my day, we played outside a lot, which allowed us to be very inventive. So what we did was we had set out to make a hopscotch game that started on my driveway, and then it kind of snaked up and then down the sidewalk onto my neighbor's driveway, and then it would snake all the way down the sidewalk again, stretch out onto my other friend's driveway that was like down the street. I don't remember how many squares there were, but there was a lot. We even drew little symbols on certain squares, and if you accidentally stepped on one, you'd have to start all the way at the beginning. It was like a whole game, kind of like an obstacle course in a way. Simpler times back then. How did you deal with insecurities as a teenager? So on this channel, I have alluded a couple of times that I was far from being one of the popular kids in high school, and I certainly dealt with a lot of crippling insecurities. And so I think what helped me get through high school in one piece was honestly just throwing myself into my interests and connecting with people online. If I wasn't at school or at my part-time job, I basically spent most of my free time watching anime, drawing anime, listening to pop punk music, and making online friends who also loved all of these things. Back then, it was on the Otaku and DeviantArt, and then I think Tumblr swooped in when I was in college or something. But in any case, making anime art friends online through these art sharing platforms really made me feel validated in my interests and allowed me to connect with like-minded people. Favorite piece of clothing / accessories, and why? My favorite would probably be my pleather moto jacket. I feel like it just instantly makes any outfit look badass, and it also makes me look and feel way tougher than I actually am. Can you share some of your hair dyeing experience? So as some of you guys probably know, I have had what hairstylists call fashion hair colors for quite a while, and I've gone through many shades in the kind of like purple and blue spectrum. I have bleached and dyed my own hair before with like one of those Manic Panic hair kits from the drugstore, and honestly it wasn't that bad, but I only did it when it was like the bottom ends of my really long hair, so it was pretty risk-free. And then the last time I bleached my hair, I had done it professionally since it was like almost my whole head, and I definitely didn't trust myself to do that on my own. And then since then, I've just been dyeing it myself whenever the color fades, and now it's completely like grown out to be only the bottom ends again. If you have really dark hair like me and want to go really light or vibrant with your hair colors, be prepared for a very, very long and rigorous bleaching process. When I went to the salon, I was there twice for like 6 hours each. It was insane. Favorite dinosaur? I mean, all dinosaurs are cool as heck, but if I had to pick a favorite, it might be the Brontosaurus, which has now been renamed to the Apatosaurus. I don't know how to say that. But anyway, I think this is my favorite because I freaking loved The Land Before Time when I was a kid, and Littlefoot has got to be like the cutest name for a dinosaur. Also, side note, the beginning of the first Land Before Time never ceased to make me bawl my eyes out. It is so sad. I remember a while back there were people denouncing the Brontosaurus as a dinosaur, and I was so heartbroken. It was like Pluto all over again, because scientists are now saying the Brontosaurus or Apatosaurus is real, and so I feel a lot better about it now. Do you like personality tests? If so, which ones have you taken and what were your results? I do, but I feel like I only take like those dumb ones on BuzzFeed. That being said, I did take the Pottermore quiz twice and I got Slytherin, which I am quite pleased with. I feel like that resonates with me. What is your favorite song on Ungodly Hour? I absolutely love this album, and my favorite song, it might be the obvious choice, but I think it has to be Ungodly Hour. If you haven't seen their MTV VMA performance, I highly recommend you check it out. They slayed it. Current favorite song? Okay, without a doubt, it's definitely Dynamite by BTS. I have been listening to it nonstop. It puts me in such a good mood. I only just recently fell into like a little bit of a BTS rabbit hole and didn't previously listen to much K-pop, so I definitely would not consider myself part of the army exactly, but I will say if I had to choose, Jungkook is my bias. Oh, and I also really love Lovesick Girls by Blackpink as well. I low-key want to change my hair to look like Lisa's in that music video because it looks so good. Favorite musical? So I really enjoy musicals, but I admit I actually have not gotten the chance to see very many. And so it might be cliche, but I have to go with Wicked. I listened to that soundtrack a lot and I really identified with Elphaba's character quite a bit. I was very emotional when I saw the show. Do you have any movie recommendations? This is a very broad question, but I guess I'll just pick a couple things that I've watched recently. So for something really light and fun, I recommend Enola Holmes on Netflix. I thought it was very entertaining and very charming. And then for something more on the action/thriller side, I recommend Alien, which I amazingly had never seen before, and now I fully realize why it's so acclaimed. It's a really fantastic film, and it really holds up on all fronts. Ripley is so badass, the practical effects are really good, and the suspense is chilling. Favorite Disney film and Pixar film? I feel like my favorite Disney film changes every few years, but right now I would say it's Hercules. I never get tired of the humor and the songs. Hades is just so sassy, and the muses being the ones to narrate the story is so fun. Plus, I really appreciate the style choice for the characters and animation. I thought it was so clever to make it reminiscent of like ancient Greek artwork. And then for Pixar movies, it's kind of a toss-up between the first Toy Story or Up. Toy Story is something that I can watch pretty often and not get tired of, and then with Up, I remember thinking it was just such a refreshing story, and Doug, the talking golden retriever, is just the cutest thing on the planet. Who's your favorite Disney princess? She is technically not a princess, but she often is, categorized in this, and so it's gotta be Mulan. Get a girl who can do both, am I right? Also, no, I have not seen the live action version and I probably never will. Favorite Disney princess companion? Definitely Mushu. And I'm not just saying that because I picked Mulan. Eddie Murphy was hysterical. Plus, he made her breakfast in the morning and I just think that's adorable. What's an unpopular opinion that you have? I'm not sure how unpopular this opinion is, but for me, I significantly prefer 2D animation over 3D. It makes me super sad that most animated films these days are in 3D. I was especially heartbroken when I heard that Studio Ghibli is planning to make a 3D animated film as well. I think that is probably the reason why I just end up rewatching old favorites or like sticking to anime, because for the most part, 3D animation just doesn't appeal to me quite as much. Of course, I think there are definitely exceptions where there's kind of a mix of styles, like with Klaus or Into the Spider-Verse. Those are really unique, and I think they successfully took animation to a new level that feels different and fresh. But all of these recent kind of Disney and DreamWorks stuff, it just starts to feel all the same to me in terms of like the visuals of it. Like, for example, going back to what I said about Hercules, I loved that during the Disney Renaissance, they would make different stylization choices depending on the film. With Hercules, it was reminiscent of the ancient Greek artwork, and then with Mulan, the characters are very like soft and reminded me of old Chinese ink paintings. And another really beautiful animated film is The Tale of Princess Kaguya, which took the ink paintings even further and like animated the entire film with that aesthetic. It's stunning. And of course, this is just like a personal preference and does not take away from the quality of the actual stories being told, but I'm such a visual person that I really like get hung up on those types of things. What was the last show you watched? The last new show that I completed, well, up to season 3 for me, was Haikyuu. I am kind of obsessed with it. The characters are just like so compelling and fun. And then I just recently started rewatching the 2nd season of The Umbrella Academy because why not? What are some of your favorite movies / shows to have on while you're not working? Well, of course, the shows I just mentioned, as well as I started watching Inuyasha: The Final Act, which is the last season, which I had never seen before. I'm only a couple of episodes in, but oh my god, it is riveting, guys. It's all killer, no filler. I am very excited to see how it all unfolds and how like this story finally concludes. Teenage crush. Oh, hands down, definitely Seth Cohen from the OC. I had the absolute biggest crush on him. Neurotic, nerdy guy who liked emo music, rode a skateboard, drew comics. I was all for it. Which fictional character did you relate with growing up versus now? When I was really young, Sailor Mercury was my favorite because she was a little bit more timid and reserved, which I really related to when I was younger. Now I really resonate with Elphaba from Wicked, which I talked about in my video last month where I did fan art of her and Glinda, but basically during Elphaba's adolescence, she struggles with insecurities related to feeling like an outsider or being different, but then once she embraces those traits about her that make her different, and when she decides to be authentic to who she is, that's when she gains her confidence and she's truly happy and like comes into her own. And so I really related to that journey. Which 3 cartoon characters do you resonate with the most? The first character is Tina Belcher from Bob's Burgers because I too was a very awkward teenager and I also had niche interests and consumed a lot of fan fiction back in those days. Second character is Kiki from Kiki's Delivery Service. I really appreciate how independent and entrepreneurial she is. And I discussed this in my video when I did a painting of her, but I also felt like I could really draw a lot of parallels between her journey with her magic powers to my journey with my artist's creativity. And then third character is Daria. This one might seem surprising to you guys since I only show you guys my like very positive, bubbly side on YouTube, which is totally genuine, of course, but to my friends in real life, they would definitely know I have a very kind of bleak, sarcastic side sometimes too. What animated character would you want to be stuck with during a zombie apocalypse? I wanted to think of someone who would be very resourceful, so I think I would have to go with Edward Elric from Fullmetal Alchemist, when he has his alchemy powers, of course. He has all the survival skills, he's good at combat, he can use alchemy to pretty much do anything, so it definitely seems like a pretty good chance of survival if I was with him. If you could meet any cartoon / anime character in real life, who would it be? Okay, I don't know if this technically counts since it's a comic, but I think I would like to hang out with Hermes from the webcomic Lore Olympus. He just seems delightful. And by the way, shout out to every single one of you who had been recommending me to read this comic for the past like year. I finally did it and I'm fully obsessed, so yes, thank you. Top 5 fictional crushes. If you guys have been with me for a little while, you know that I always have like 1,000 different fictional boyfriends, so this was very hard to narrow down, but currently if I had to choose 5, it would be, in no particular order, Howl from Howl's Moving Castle, Jess Mariano from Gilmore Girls, Greed / Ling from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, Hades from Lore Olympus, and Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings. The most random of assortments. Sokka or Zuko? Okay, first, how dare you? And secondly, while both characters are amazing and I love them dearly, I gotta go with my boy Sokka. He has always been my favorite. Also, I just think it is so hilarious how shook the internet is with that one screenshot of his hair down. We love to see it. Who are your top 3 favorite Steven Universe characters? Number 1, hands down, is Garnet. She was always my favorite from the very beginning. Second is Peridot because she's so strange and ridiculous, but it's incredibly endearing. And then third is like either like the Watermelon Stevens or the Pumpkin Dog. I think they're so cute. What is your favorite underrated anime? Michiko to Hatchin. I haven't seen it in a very long time, but I really remember it resonating with me when I watched it. It's got a really unique story and features a ton of diverse characters, which is great. Plus, of course, I live for a badass female lead character. And so that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope that you had fun. And if you are interested in seeing the exclusive Patreon video where I do the sketching portion of this illustration, or if you'd also like to receive these guys as rewards sent to your home, I'll have the Patreon link in the description down below, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!